I think the first thing with living an abundant life is to know what that means to you. And then once you know what it means to you, once you can dream it, you can visualize it, you can say, this is what a day in the life of future me looks like. This is how I feel about these aspects of my life. Then we can make sure that we're working towards those things every single day.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Julie Johnson, a listener who is on to share her journey to financial independence at a young age. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life, to wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Seth Godin. We believe what we believe, and once we believe something, it becomes a self-fulfilling truth. That begs the question, what do you believe, and is it serving you? I'm constantly reminded the reflection in the mirror is our biggest enemy. Our guest today is going to share how she had many stories in her mind and how she breaks through them to achieve success. But before we get to her, let's review last week's action step. Get to know yourself, what you love, and that kind of feeds back into today's quote. Do you know the answer to the question of who you are and what you love? Having clarity on who you are, what you believe, and what you want makes life so much easier. But many people struggle to get this clarity. And it's because many times we're unconsciously being pushed into the drift. If you don't understand what I mean by that, there's a great book that shares how this happens. It's called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. It was written in the 1930s and it wasn't released until a few years ago because his family would not let him put it out. Can you imagine that? Once you realize you're in the drift, a great book to help you move forward is Living Forward, A Proven Path to Stop Drifting and Get the Life You Want by Michael Hyatt. I have all my clients go through that process. It's amazing for getting to know yourself, having clarity, and defining what it is that you love and you want. And it allows you to create new beliefs about the life you want. And once you have that roadmap of what you want, it becomes so much easier to achieve it and to get what you want. Today, we're going to be chatting about that with our guest, Julie Johnson, who's a mother and an entrepreneur. She's a licensed mental health counselor, and she's passionate about providing mental health and behavioral support to Iowans. and to spreading the importance of breathing techniques for kids. She's founder of Heart and Solutions, a strength-based counseling agency in Iowa, and she's author of a children's book, Breathing Through the Year, A Child's Guide to Holiday-Themed Breathing Techniques. She and her daughter run a nonprofit to raise money to temporarily house pets displaced by domestic violence. Let's meet our guest and hear her story. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Julie Johnson. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah. So I have a very love-hate relationship with money a lot of the time. So my story starts when I was 1 year old. I was born in Seoul, Korea. At the age of 1, I was given to an adoption agency to be adopted to the United States. And at that time, it was the 80s, and a lot of kids were getting adopted from Korea because there had been the Korean War and there had been a really big need for adoption to other countries. And then these adoption agencies had just kind of continued even after that demand for housing and homes for these kids was no longer as much of a need. And so I was adopted at the age of 1.5. And so at that time, they had all of these groups for kids to get to go. And they had kind of like support groups for the adopted parents. And so I met a lot of other Korean kids who were adopted. And we had a lot of friends that were adopted. And so the main storyline that we were given, this main narrative that all of the groups said, tell your adopted kids this, it'll make them feel better, is that, their parents really wanted to keep them and really liked having them around and wanted to keep them. But because of financial reasons, they couldn't keep them. And because they wanted to, give you a better life in another country. They wanted you to have resources that they didn't have to provide you. And so that was the main narrative around money for me when I was in those really impressionable ages. And I have a 4-year-old now. And so it really keeps me on my toes about how I speak about money in her presence and to her and what I teach her about it, because I know that this idea of connecting money with security or money with people, like with relationships, really had a huge impact in my life growing up, and even with my relationship with money today. So it sounds really great to tell a kid, it's not because of you. You were given up for adoption because, your parents didn't have the resources. But what it kind of cemented in my mind was that if you have enough money, or if you can earn enough money, or if you can keep enough money, then you get to keep your family. You get to keep your relationships. There's a huge drive, especially in that age, to keep our relationships, which is good evolutionary wise, because kids who are connected with other people survived in the wild, right? So, baby rabbits who want to be near their mom are better protected than baby rabbits who wander off. And so, because I think I was getting those messages at the same time, it really cemented in me a core belief that if I want to keep my relationships, then I need to have money. And so you can kind of see where those intertwined. And then when I had my daughter, so I had my daughter when I was 30, and I had a huge amount of postpartum anxiety after I had her. And what I came to find out and realize was that connection was so strong still that anytime anything would happen in my business where something wouldn't go the way that I wanted it to go, or an opportunity didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to, or that I thought it would, I would take that as a threat to my relationship with my daughter. And I would find myself having these very emotional reactions to money issues that didn't seem like they were very helpful to me, right? Like I would have these just really reactions to it. And once I traced, well, what am I thinking is going to happen? I realized that if I would give a speech or a presentation, for example, at a conference, I'd put a lot of pressure on that speech. And at the end of it, if it didn't go the way that I thought it should, or that I didn't feel like I said what I needed to say, or the audience didn't like it, I would start going down this rabbit hole of, and now because I did a horrible job on this speech, nobody's going to ever be a client at my counseling agency. And so my business is going to fold, and I'm going to lose my house, and I'm going to be homeless, and they're going to come and take my daughter. And that was kind of where my brain would always go. And so once I identified that and realized that, okay, I'm not upset because of potential loss of income necessarily, it's what that income represents to me, which is my daughter, which is the worst thing that I could lose, right? And so that's why I was having that very like physical, emotional reaction to those things in my business having to do with money. So I would say that that's where my relationship with money started out, is just those messages about how important it is to have resources, and to have money, because, otherwise you could lose everything you care about. And having lived through that. So growing up, my parents really didn't, we talked a lot about saving. And I had a piggy bank as a kid. I remember playing with change and making little dirt piles with change with my construction trucks and stuff. So I know we talked a lot about it. And when I was maybe when I was 10, I got a little checkbook from it was just a toy checkbook, but I got to write checks out of that. And my parents did a system with me where if I got money for a job or for a gift or something, that if I put it in my savings account, they would match that and put that in my savings account. And then I could write checks out of my account for things that I wanted to buy. So we did talk a lot about money. But there was still just a lot to learn once I got out on my own, and once I started to work and have my own money. So a little bit of an overview of my childhood experiences with money.
And that's quite interesting. And it's interesting how, in their desire to help by telling you it was a financial situation, they created a whole money mindset that until you understand it and approach it, it's hard for you to get beyond it. So just out of curiosity, have you kept track with any of the other adopted kids and how they feel about money?
This is one of my favorite topics. Whenever I meet somebody who was adopted from Korea, once I get to know them a little bit, this is one of my favorite conversations to have with them is what were you told about why you were adopted? And so prevalently, because the adoption agencies out here were training this. So they were having these focus groups with other, adopted parents and these support groups. And they were telling them, this is the best way to say it, because the parents would say, my kid is asking, how do I tell them? How do I explain it to them? And this was what the literature at that time was telling them to do. And it sounds so reasonable, right? Like you can't blame any of the parents for saying it, because it sounds like such a comforting thing to say. And it is better than saying like, you were a horrible child, like, no, obviously you don't want to say that. And so to say, hey, this was a good thing they did for you. This was a gift that they gave to you. It just sounds so much better. But time and time again, I talk to adoptees of my age during that big, adoption push from Korea in the 80s, and they have similar experiences. And sometimes that manifests itself kind of like it did with me with the business aspect. But other times it's affected people's relationships with significant others, with partners, with siblings, because money became such an it just became tied in so much with those relationships. And so if there was like a loan or something that happened between people, things like that, it just took on such a more personal nature than maybe that financial interaction might have had otherwise. So it's a really interesting situation, and I'm studying to get my doctorate right now, and part of my doctoral requirements is to do a research paper. And this is a very, very interesting topic that I think would be a great research study. I haven't found any studies on this topic, so I am purely speaking from anecdote and talking to other people, and then sharing my own personal experience. I haven't seen any research studies on this, but it's definitely, I think it would be a great study to look at.
And so, how did you let go or change your money mindsets from the one that you grew up with?
In some ways, the money mindset that I grew up with, and that because of the nurturing and discussions that my parents had with me about money growing up, I think that in some ways, even though that fear or that, connection of you need to have money or you lose your family, even though that fear was detrimental to me in a lot of ways, caused me a lot of anxiety, caused me to make some fairly terrible business decisions in my life, has caused me, that I've learned from since then, and they make sense now to me. But, even though it's been somewhat detrimental to me in those ways, it's also been very helpful to me. I think that drive to be always working towards that goal has served me in a lot of ways. And I've been able to serve a lot of people in the businesses that I've started and that I continue to grow. I've been able to serve more people because of that drive. I think once I recognized that drive for what it was, and then I was able to mitigate some of those negative aspects of it. So it's not necessarily something that I want to throw away, because in some ways it has served me well. So for me, it was a matter of whenever I'm in a 12-step addictions program. So I'm in Overeaters Anonymous. And not a lot of people know about Overeaters Anonymous, but basically most people know about Alcoholics Anonymous. And so Alcoholics Anonymous is a 12-step program, and you practice abstinence from alcohol. And so Overeaters Anonymous is the same concept. It's just for certain allergenic foods. And so as I was getting into Overeaters Anonymous, I went to that program when my daughter was 3 days old, because I had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant with my daughter. And they said, follow this food plan and check your blood sugar and only eat this many carbs per meal, and I had every reason to want to follow that food plan. There was, having a child, I had wanted for basically my whole life. I wanted to be a mom. And so I would do anything to keep my child safe. But I realized that I couldn't follow their food plan. I'd do a really good job for like 5 days, and then I'd go eat a box of ice cream sandwiches, right? And so I couldn't follow it. And I said, this is not typical. I always thought that if I had a good enough reason, that I'd be able to control my eating. And it turned out that I had the best reason I would ever have, which was that, these increased blood sugar levels are a danger to my health and to my daughter's health. And so I had the best reason I'm ever going to have, and I still couldn't do it. And so when my daughter was 3 days old, I went to my first Overeaters Anonymous meeting. And a big part of the steps of Overeaters Anonymous is identifying when we have fears and identifying when we have resentments. And so as we go through our day, when we're working the program actively, we identify any time that we have a fear or a resentment, and then we do what's called a 10th step on it. And in that 10th step, we identify our character defects that are causing us to have that resentment or that fear. And so those character defects are usually selfishness, like looking at it just from my point of view, thinking that I know best on the situation causes me a lot of resentment. Self-seeking, so looking for my worth in other things. Looking for, reflection of my worth in other things, that causes me a lot of fear and that causes me a lot of resentment. Dishonesty. So dishonesty causes me a lot of fear and a lot of resentment. And so when I can look at a situation, say I did a presentation and I had hoped that it would help my business, and then I, forgot to do a section that I was supposed to do, or I got flustered in the middle of it and lost my train of thought. I could get really fearful about that, and I could get really resentful about something like that. And so I would do this 10th step, or I continue to do these 10th steps every day, where I identify, am I being selfish? Am I thinking that I'm so perfect that every presentation I give should be a home run, right? If I think that way, I'm going to have resentment. I'm going to have fear. Am I looking for my worth in the imagined opinion of this audience? Am I looking for that to determine my worth? Am I looking for, my business to determine my worth? And then dishonesty. So the dishonest thoughts were typically, hey, I'm telling myself the lie, and I'm believing the lie that if I don't give a perfect presentation, that my business is going to close and I'm going to lose my daughter, right? That's a lie. That's not the truth. The truth is that, maybe I would lose some business, but I'm not going to lose my daughter over it, right? And so, or dishonesty would tell me that if I don't give a perfect presentation, then I'm not a worthy speaker, right? Or I'm not a worthy business person, or I'm not a worthy counselor. I don't know my stuff. So all of these lies that come into and create those defects of character, which then create the fear or the resentment. And so in that step, I really had to look at each time. And most of the 10th steps that I would do were fears. And most of those fears I noticed had to do with money or had to do with the business. And a lot of the resentments that I would process through in that way and say, okay, what is the truth here? Where am I being selfish? Where am I being dishonest? Where am I being self-seeking? And where am I being fearful? And going through the process to mitigate each of those. And then I would realize that a lot of these have to do with money, and a lot of them have to do, when I got to that fear part, what am I afraid of? A lot of them came down to that I'll lose my daughter. And so going through that process was really, really helpful for me. And when I identify the dishonesties, I also then have to say the truth. So when I say, okay, where am I being dishonest about this presentation that I gave that maybe was a flop, or maybe wasn't as perfect as I thought it should be. If I'm fearful about that presentation afterwards, then I could say, okay, I'm being dishonest, telling myself the lie that it was a horrible presentation. Like, I don't know what people were thinking. I don't know if people got something out of the parts that I did do well. I don't know if people got something out of the fact that I wasn't perfect up there, right? Like, maybe that was helpful to somebody. It's dishonest for me to tell myself that I know that this was a failure, or that I know that this was a negative thing. It's dishonest. And then I have to tell the truth. So then I have to say to myself, okay, if that's a dishonest thing, then what is the truth? And the truth is that I don't know how me messing up on that section was actually helpful to myself in the long run, or it might actually be helpful to somebody else who was in the room in the long run, or that I might be doing this presentation today and I might tell that story, and maybe somebody hears that and is able to do this process with it. And maybe that's going to be helpful to somebody. So that is the truth. And those truths, the more that I did those, the more that I told myself the truth that, like, okay, my fear is telling me this dishonest thought that, like, if I lose my job or I lose my company, that DHS is going to come and take my daughter, right? And if I say, okay, that's the lie, so what is the truth? And the truth is that Korea in the 80s did not have social services. Korea in the 80s did not have food banks. They did not have utility assistance. They did not have Department of Housing and Urban Development for rental assistance. They didn't have any of that. And so the truth is that, yes, in Korea in the 80s, even if that is the situation, that was a different time and place than what my reality is right now. And in my reality right now, growing up or raising my daughter up right now, even if I did lose my business, the truth is that I have an education. The truth is that I have job skills. The truth is that I could start a new business because I went through that failed business and survived it and learned from it. And so I could start a new business and not make the same mistakes. Or I could go work at my daughter's daycare, and still buy food and still be okay and not lose my daughter. And so the more that I had to do those, when I started the program, I was doing those, like 20, 30 of those a day, because if we think about our day, how many times do we feel a resentment or a fear? And a lot of times they're just a small one, but they crop up, throughout the day. And now that I've processed through a lot of them, I probably do like one or two a day, because a lot of them were repeats that I needed to hear that truth just over and over and over until that became, the new neural pathway that my brain would take when I had those things come up.
And so you faced the mirror and you spent a lot of time doing the inner work that we all need to do to kind of quiet down our lizard brains and that are always throwing that fear up. And 1,000 years ago, it made sense to have that fear part of our brain to keep us safe. But in today's world, we essentially don't have to face most of those threats. And so it's kind of crazy that we still haven't learned how to overcome ourselves. And so through that process, I know you lost, because I think you said you were at 255 pounds. You got down to 122 pounds. Congratulations. That's a tremendous amount of weight loss, and to keep it off. Did you have a special diet or program that you used? Because I know you mentioned earlier the diet you were on, you couldn't stick to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So the weight loss was a huge benefit of Overeaters Anonymous. But it's kind of it's a side benefit because my mind is just so much clearer. And my emotions are so much clearer. But the weight loss for sure. I mean, if anybody that's listening feels like they try to control their food and they feel like they can't, or they feel like their eating is out of control, either with overeating or with undereating. So I was also, when I was, before I was in treatment, I was a good restrictor too. And so usually, we see people, they call it like a yo-yo diet, right? We can lose some weight and then we gain back more. And so, I had a lot of that in my life too. But with Overeaters Anonymous, it's the same as with Alcoholics Anonymous. So with Alcoholics Anonymous, people generally know that like you don't drink anything. If you're in Alcoholics Anonymous and you're in recovery, you've got, however many months or however many years of sobriety. And if you go to a wedding and there's a champagne toast, you don't drink that champagne. You either ask for apple juice or you just don't drink it. You just toast with water. And it's the same thing with Overeaters Anonymous. So there are certain foods that I have an abnormal reaction to. It's a physical abnormal reaction to it. And so just like if you're allergic to peanuts, right? And you eat peanuts, you have a different reaction, physical reaction, than somebody who's not allergic to peanuts. So, for peanuts, it might be that, you have hives or you have swelling. With certain foods, for me, the reaction is that it clouds my judgment and it causes the phenomenon of craving. And the phenomenon of craving kind of hijacks my thinking and tells me that it's okay to eat a box of cookies, tells me that it would be a great idea to eat an entire loaf of bread dipped in butter, right? Like it does these things in my brain, gives me that physical craving that I'm just not at all able to overcome. And so the only way, and the premise is the same in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That we have an addiction to alcohol, and that we have an allergic reaction to alcohol, in that when we drink it, it causes us to want more and to never be able to be satisfied with the amount. And it's the same thing for me, sugar and salt. I'm allergic to sugar and I'm allergic to salt in the same way that people are allergic to honey, or dairy. Because when I eat those substances, it causes me to want more and more and more, to the point where I can't be satisfied by a box of cookies or a bag of donuts. And, the idea of one cookie out of that bag or one donut out of that bag is just completely impossible. I might be able to do it for a day or 2 days or hold off on that craving, but eventually that craving is going to overcome me. And so the remedy for that in Overeaters Anonymous is that we are abstinent from those foods. And we do not eat the foods that cause us to have those reactions. And so I follow a weighed and measured food plan. So my lunch and my dinner are the exact same meal, basically, every day. And my breakfast is the same every day, and my snacks are the same every day. It's not necessarily the same food, but it might be like, for my snacks, it's always 6 ounces of fruit and 1 ounce of nuts. So like almonds or cashews. So there's always those kind of parameters on it of like how many ounces of vegetables I eat at lunch. Like I eat 8 ounces of vegetables at lunch and I eat 8 ounces of vegetables at dinner. I eat certain, 4 ounces of protein and I eat 3 ounces of carbs. And I don't eat any sugar or salt. And it was a really long process of being able to succumb to a food plan and like surrender to a food plan, because that sounded terrible to me and it sounded super restricting, and like I'd be missing out and like I wouldn't be able to celebrate birthdays or anything. But really what those objections to the food plan were they were fears and they were resentments popping up and telling me these things. And so once I had the tools to remove those fears and those resentments by removing or identifying my selfishness, my self-seeking, my dishonesty, and my fear that were causing me to have the resentment, which was then causing me to not be able to follow the food plan, right? So, for example, if I was going to, my daughter's birthday was on June 1st. And so, when you think birthday party, you think birthday cake, and especially for a little kid. So we made a birthday cake, and we had birthday cupcakes, and we had a little like family get together. We had my husband's parents over, and we had lasagna, and we had snack food for her party. And before being in program and before having that step to be able to remove that fear, I would have had all kinds of fears about that party coming up, right? And being on a food plan during that party. I would have been like, people are going to think I'm weird for not eating birthday cake, and it's not going to be as special of a birthday because I'm not going to eat the cake, and it's not going to be, it's going to feel like I'm rejecting the celebration, and I'm not going to fit in, and people are going to ask me about it. It's just going to draw attention to it, and all of that. But those are all fears, right? So if I can say, okay, well, if I'm afraid, if I don't want to not eat cake, and if I don't want to just eat my own meal and not eat lasagna with everybody else, but I've got a fear that's stopping me from doing it. Well, where am I being selfish that's causing that fear? I am trying to make that party about me and what I'm eating. Like, how selfish is that? That party isn't about me at all, or about what I'm eating. Like, who cares about that? Other people aren't actually thinking that. But because I'm I'm a human, so I'm a selfish person, I'm trying to make that party about me and about what I'm eating. And it's not about that. It's about my daughter and my daughter having fun and having my daughter's favorite foods there. Right. So if I can overcome that selfishness, a lot of times when I think about how am I being selfish that's causing this fear or this resentment, I just have to laugh at myself because I go, oh my gosh, how selfish that, I'm spending all of this time and energy on what am I going to eat, and worrying about what other people are going to think about me at this party, when this party is not even about me. And I'll think about, where am I being self-seeking? So am I looking for my worth in something that doesn't actually determine my worth? So I might say I'm being self-seeking because I'm looking for my worth in how well I do what everybody else is doing, right? Am I eating everything that everybody else is eating? Because if I am, then that increases my self-worth. That's a ridiculous statement when I say it out loud. Eating what other people are eating or not eating what other people are eating actually has no bearing on my self-worth. It doesn't improve it and it doesn't decrease it. But when I'm having that fear, that is actually what I'm telling myself, right? When I'm fearing that people are going to judge me. So I'm being self-seeking. I'm looking for my worth in those things. I'm also looking for, potentially in that situation, I might say, I'm looking for my worth as a mom in how well this birthday party goes for my daughter, right? She's only going to turn 4 one time. I'm planning this party. I want everything to go exactly perfect. And the fact that I won't be eating birthday cake feels like a potential threat to my daughter's party being great, which then if I'm being self-seeking and I'm looking for my worth in how that party goes, then that's a threat to my self-worth, right? But if I step back and go, wait a minute, though, my self-worth isn't actually measured by this party, then I can start to let that go. The dishonesty, we talked about some of the dishonest parts, but also, okay, I'm telling myself the lie that if my in-laws disapprove of what I'm eating, then that's a horrible thing. But the truth is that one, my in-laws probably don't care at all what I'm eating. And then also, even if they do disapprove of what I'm eating, even if they, for some reason, are adamant that I should be eating cake and I'm a horrible mom if I don't, or I'm a horrible person if I don't, and I'm wrecking the party, is that am I going to be still okay? And the truth is, I am going to be okay. Even if they judge me for that, I'm going to be fine. And I get to choose how I react to that judgment. So if they were my in-laws would never do this, but if they were mean to me about it, and they were how can you be such a bad mom for not eating this cake and lasagna? I get to choose how I react to that. And I'd probably have resentment against them for it because I'd be who are you to judge me? Right. So I'd probably resent them a little bit. But the good thing is I've got these tools in place so that I can say, okay, I've got a resentment. where am I being selfish that is causing this resentment? I'm telling myself the lie that like my in-laws should approve of everything that I do, And so it just kind of spirals into itself. But because I've got the tools to cope with the resentments and the fears that so often drive our behaviors and our actions, then I'm able to stick with that food plan.
And so the reality is most people don't care what you do, what you eat, and they don't remember the party 2 weeks later anyway. And so just changing your thought patterns and your mindset around that, your kid is not going to remember the party. And so a lot of it is just letting go of what society thinks. And I think in the past, that was an issue. You were part of a tribe. And if you got shunned by the tribe, then you were sent out and you essentially died because there was no society to support you. But today, those things don't matter. And yet our brains haven't evolved. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. If you can share with the audience a little bit about your financial journey, because you have been financially successful. And I think it's important for people to see it doesn't matter where we came from. We get to choose where we're going.
Absolutely. I was married in 2011. So I went to graduate school from 2008 to 2011. And then right out of graduate school, my husband and I got married. And right after the wedding, so like the day after the wedding, we started on the Dave Ramsey baby steps. So that's from the Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. And so the very next day, so as we were driving back, we got married in Illinois and we live in Iowa. So it's about a 4-hour drive. And on the way back, we were tempted to stop at a restaurant and get some food. And we said, no, it's the very first day. We can't, we can't go off budget on the very, very first day, right, that we're doing this. And so we waited and we got home and we ate lunch and it was totally fine. So that was the very first day. The first Dave Ramsey baby step is you save $1,000 baby emergency fund. And I was 27 when I got married and I didn't have $1,000. Like we didn't have $100. I was just out of grad school. I was working as a behavioral health intervention counselor. So I was working a bachelor's level position with the hopes of moving up in the company. And I was bartending on the weekends, and I would open up this restaurant bar. I would open up at 5 a.m. and do breakfast run on Sunday mornings. I would bartend on Friday nights and Thursday nights there, and so the money that I made doing my grown up job, my counseling job, went towards bills, and then the money that I made from bartending and from tips from serving breakfast, that went towards our baby step 1 emergency fund of $1,000. And so I would bring home my tips in my like bartender apron, and I'd bring out my money and I'd like count it out. And then I remember writing it on the envelope, how much money was in the envelope and then how much money we had to go and, how much I had contributed to it that day. And I live in a town of 2,500 people. And so bartending was, I used to live in Rhode Island and I used to bartend in Rhode Island, and you made some decent nights in Rhode Island. Here in Iowa, a good night was like $45, $50. And so it took me a long time it took us a long time to get to that $1,000 baby step. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. We're not going to get to do this. But we got there. And then the second step is pay off all your debts. And there was a lot of resistance with pay off all your debts because I had just finished grad school. So I had student loans. My husband had student loans. He had like a Men's Warehouse debt from his friend got married and he was in the wedding when he was 21. So like 8 years prior. And he rented a tux for it and he took out the payment plan and he still had a debt to this like Men's Warehouse place for this suit. We owed money on a lawnmower. We had done like the Lowe's, like take money out. It was like 12 months, no interest or whatever. But then after that, you get all the back interest on it. And so we were making payments on a riding lawnmower. We were making payments on our furniture. So we had a payment on like our dining room table and our entertainment center and stuff like that. And so we had a lot of debts. So the baby step 2 is you list out all your debts, smallest to largest, and you just start putting that money towards it. And so we did that. We paid off all of our debts. We had two car loans at the time. Plus my husband's car loan was huge because he was leasing a car for work before he had bought the car that he had at that time. And so what they did is they rolled over all the lease stuff into the new car loan. So he had a car that he was paying like $800 a month towards this car loan because it was not just the car loan, but it was the lease stuff for the previous car that like he didn't even own. That was a lease. So we had all of these debts. I'm sure there were a lot more. Those are the ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Like I had a Kohl's account, just random things. So we started chipping away, paying those off. I had printed out this little like line graph. And so we like colored it in every time we paid $100 towards a debt. And we became debt free. And that was amazing. And we had bought our house, the house that we live in. We had actually bought this house in 2008. I was working as a debt collector at that time. This was when I was in graduate school. I was working as a debt collector and we were commission based. So it just happened to work out where we found this house. It was $10,000. They listed it for $14,000 and we said, no, we're not going to pay $14,000. We'll give you 10 for it. And they said, okay. And so we were going to have to take out a loan for that. This was before we were doing the baby steps, before we were married. I was still in grad school. So we were going to take out a personal loan for that $10,000. And then I ended up having a really good month that month and ended up making a commission check that allowed us to pay cash for this house that we're living in now. And so then we moved into this house and that really did help our debt snowball quite a bit to speed things up because we didn't have a mortgage payment. And so that was really, really helpful. So we got debt free. Then we went into baby step 3 and we went into baby step 4 and 5. So baby step 3 is 3 to 6 months emergency fund. So we built up a 6-month emergency fund and I had no idea how instrumental that emergency fund was going to be in my life in the next couple of years. But we built that up. And then baby step 4 is contribute to retirement funds. Baby step 5, start a child's ESA account for college, which we didn't have a child at that time. So we skipped over that. And then baby step 6 is pay off the mortgage, but we didn't have a mortgage because we live in a $10,000 house. And so obviously we put money into it. You know, we had to put a new roof in it. We did all of the demolition ourselves. We put our own, flooring down. So we did as much of it as we could ourselves. But of course, we had expenses. We paid an electrician, we paid a plumber. We bought a roof. We built a garage, things like that. But we were able to do them in our own time. And we were able to save up cash for those things. So we'd say, okay, we need to fix the plumbing. That's going to be like $4,000. We were able to just slowly over time put what we would have put towards a mortgage towards saving up $4,000 to, fix whatever plumbing issue it was. So, so that was a long process, and we're still working on that house. We live in it, and it's not perfect. I don't know that houses ever get to be perfect, but we continue to make, adjustments and repairs to it, but we can save up for them and pay cash instead of have to do a loan for those. So then we were baby step 7. And baby step 7 is, you don't have any debts and you don't have any mortgage. So all of the money that you bring in is yours to spend or to give away. And so, the baby steps have just changed our lives so dramatically. I mean, that was 2011 that we started it. So that was only like 9 years ago, which is incredible to me how different things are now than they were then, because I just remember so vividly coming home with an apron of $40, and putting it towards my $1,000 emergency fund and just feeling like I'm never going to get there. So then we had the 6-month emergency fund, and I had worked my way up. By 2014, I had worked my way up in that company to vice president. And so I was in charge of the therapy department in that company, and things started to go just were really, really challenging in that company at that time. And so I was looking at, wanting to leave that company, and thinking, gosh, where am I going to get a job where I'm going to be vice president, right? Like, if I go get, it's Iowa, there aren't a ton of options. I thought, man, if I go get another job, I'm going to start out as a therapist again. I'm going to start out, entry level. I'm going to do this all over again. And my husband and I started interviewing, and I had been in management of this company. And so I was really looking specifically at, how things were structured and what procedures were. And I wasn't finding a company I wanted to work for. And my husband said, if you want a company that is all of these things on your list, like, you're going to have to create that. And so I quit my job, and I started Heart and Solutions, which is my counseling agency now. So I started that in 2014, and only was able to do it because I had that 6-month emergency fund, and we didn't have any debt, and we didn't have a mortgage payment. My husband and I talk about that a lot. We say, man, if we had not gone through that debt snowball, right, and we had not spent that 4 years, almost 4 years, paying down our debts, then there's no way with a lawnmower payment and a furniture, a table payment and 2 student loans and 2 car loans. There's no way that we could have, that I could have quit my job as an executive in a fairly large company, not super large, like 60 people. But there's no way I could have quit that job. And so I did. And in the first year of the company, I didn't make any money. It cost me a lot of my savings account. And we ran into all of these issues in that first year that otherwise would have shut down the business. I always say this business is next month will be 6 years old. And I always say, twice a year, we should have been shut down. Like, there are just things that happen with insurance companies. There are things that happen with COVID-19, things like this that happened, that by all means really had the power to shut us down. There was one insurance company where we did sessions for free with that company for over a year. And we didn't get reimbursed for those sessions after that year. We just started getting paid for those. And so my husband was working sales at that time, and his paycheck would come in and it would go right back out because we had employees. Like, we had to make payroll and we weren't getting paid for the services that we were doing. And so his paycheck would go straight into that, plus money from our savings account, our emergency fund. And so that emergency fund just really, really saved us, just allowed us to stay in business during all of those challenges that, rightfully should have shut us down, to be honest. It's like we get to experience several miracles a year, So yeah, since then, my business has expanded. We've got 7 locations. And then last year, we purchased our first building for Hearten Solutions. And so we've got 7 locations, and we were renting all of those locations. And we were able to save up as a company and purchase our first building that is owned by the company. We got to renovate it. We got to make it what we want it to be for a counseling space. And it just provides, stability of, I don't have to worry about, is our landlord going to sell that building, and is the new owner going to kick us out? Or, what happens at the end of our lease? Are they always going to want to renew it and things like that? So, buying that building was just, for me, it just showed me kind of how far we had come, my husband and I, as a married couple, in terms of our finances, because, 9 years ago, we didn't have $1,000. Like, $1,000 was impossible. We had such a negative net worth. And then, now, 9 years later, being able to, or I guess when we bought the building, we bought it last August. We just moved into it after renovations. But, so 8 years later, being able to buy that building for the company is just, it's really great for me to, I guess, step back and look at that, because, it's not that I or my husband and I are like special in any way. It's just that, like, somehow those Dave Ramsey steps, got to me, and we followed them. And they worked. They changed our lives.
Congratulations. And it's small baby steps, and those principles apply to any part of life, whatever part of life that you need to make improvements in. Take the little tiny baby steps forward and continue to do them. And if you stay on the path, you will have success. It's just one of those proven principles. So you wrote a book, Breathing Through the Years, for kids. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and my training is in working with children therapeutically. And when my daughter was 1 year old, I started to do some breathing techniques with her, but I wanted to make them fun and, get her attention with them. And so, hand movements to it, and I would make different voices and sounds. And what I found was that it was easy for me to teach them to her when they were attached to something she already liked. So like blowing out the birthday candles is one, right? So what kid doesn't love blowing out birthday candles or blowing out candles? And I thought, there's a breathing technique in that, right? We can practice smelling the cake and imagining the cake and smelling it in our imagination, and then exhaling and being intentional about blowing out that birthday candle. And so what I did is I came up with 12 different breathing techniques that are all associated with different American holidays throughout the year. So there's a New Year's breathing technique, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, There's a back to school, summer vacation. So each, major holiday has a breathing technique associated with it. And so I had written these, little breathing techniques down. And then I ended up partnering with a friend of mine who is a graphic designer, or she's actually a medical student, but she's very, very talented with graphics and design as well. And so she illustrated these for me, and we just self-published that this year. So, for example, the 4th of July breathing technique, right? We just came to that one. And in that one, the child imagines that we are sitting in a comfortable place, maybe on the beach or on the grass or in the bed of a pickup truck. We're sitting in a comfortable place and we're watching the night sky and we're looking at fireworks. And this technique, actually, I was on another podcast recently on a PTSD podcast, and this technique is actually really helpful for people who have PTSD and who are triggered by fireworks. This technique can actually help with that as well. So we're imagining the fireworks in our mind, and as the firework kind of shoots up into the air, we imagine that we're breathing in as it goes higher and higher. So we do a really deep inhale as that firework shoots up into the sky, and then we imagine it explode in the sky and all the different colors. And then as it kind of fades down and the light kind of dims into the black night, we go, ah, and we breathe out. And then we imagine another one goes up, we breathe in, and then it explodes, and we say, ooh, as it fades into the blackness. And kids are really excited about fireworks. My daughter loves fireworks. She doesn't always like the noise with it, but she loves seeing them, and it's exciting for her. So I wanted to attach those breathing techniques to things that kids are already excited about and that they will be able to easily remember how to do them. So my daughter's 4 now, but we have we have a YouTube channel. So if you search me on YouTube, or if you search Breathing Through the Year on YouTube, you will find different breathing technique videos based on this book that my daughter Monica and I have created, where she explains the breathing techniques to any kiddos that are listening that would want to follow along with us.
And that's very cool that you're doing that. And then, this is one of the things, we don't teach kids how to live life, right? We don't teach them money. We don't teach them how to build great relationships. We don't teach them how to breathe and how to control their emotions as much as we probably should. We're too busy putting them in schools that educate them on things that none of us can remember 10 years after high school. Nobody can help their kids in high school because you forget how to do all the stuff they taught you. But yet the important things in life we aren't taught, and that's a shame. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
So every morning I spend 15 minutes outside with a notebook, and I write down what I want my life to look like. And so I think the first thing with living an abundant life is to know what that means to you. And then once you know what it means to you, once you can dream it, you can visualize it, you can say, this is what a day in the life of future me looks like. This is how I feel about these aspects of my life. Then we can make sure that we're working towards those things every single day. I know that, as humans, we have a tendency to, and I don't remember who said it, I want to say like Gary Keller, but that we overestimate what we can do in a day, and then we underestimate what we can do in a year. And so having those time boundaries. I use time blocking for my days. And so having those time boundaries on our day can really make us be really intentional about what we're putting into that day, knowing that we only have 24 hours and we need to be sleeping for 8 of those hours, and we need to be eating for, at least 15 minutes each meal and things like that. So, so I think that's the secret right there is identifying it, like putting that time in your day to dream about it and to imagine it, and then intentionally putting that time in your day every day to work towards it.
And that's a big part of life, is when we're intentional and we have a direction, then we tend to achieve what it is that we want. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I wish I had learned to wake up at 5 a.m. sooner. Right now I wake up at 5 a.m. and I get so much more done. And my life is so much less stressful. Waking up at 5 a.m. and doing my 5 a.m. routine. And I think this all the time. I say this all the time. I wish I had known that when I was 10, because I could have effectively tripled the productivity that I would have had up until now. So waking up at 5 a.m., I wish I had known that. I also wish that I had known about time blocking when I was younger. I think it would have helped me a lot. I follow the Getting Things Done method by David Allen. So the book is Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. And when I was an executive at another company as a vice president, I was stressed all the time. And I never stopped working, and there was never, lack of things to be done that were crises or emergencies all the time. It was just like firefighting constantly. And I found this book, Getting Things Done. And in my organization, we follow it. So the leadership all follows it. And so that we have similar systems that we're using, but I just can't recommend it enough. It allows me to be productive, but to not have the stress and not have the mental loading that typically we associate with being productive, or that we associate with being successful, like the busyness that we tend to associate with having outcomes or achievement. I realized through this book and through practicing what that book teaches that I didn't need the busyness or the panic, the adrenaline rush to get things done, that I could get things done in a productive way without having those thoughts on my mind all of the time. So those are definitely the three books that I wish I had read. The 5 a.m. thing is from the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. I can't recommend that book enough either. That book is amazing. There's a really, really great Facebook group that goes along with that book. And I wish I had read that book when I was 10, and I wish I had read Getting Things Done when I was 10 as well.
And that's true. Being intentional and then using your calendar and blocking out your time and achieving your goals instead of running around putting out fires is definitely a recipe for success. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
It would be read. Read every single day. Any success that I've had in my life has been because of something I've read or somebody that I've met. Dave Ramsey says that all the time, that, we're 5 years from now, we'll be the same exact person we are today, except for the people that we meet and the books that we read. That is what influences us the most in who we become. So my biggest tip would be to read, and to put reading into your daily schedule somewhere so that it's protected. Because reading is such there's so much resistance to picking up a book. I know for me, I have resistance to picking up a book, even though I know how beneficial it is to me. It's just something about I have to find a book and find a place to sit and find my page and turn on the light. But when I put it in my schedule, so, from 5:30 to 6 a.m. every morning, I'm walking on the treadmill and I am reading a book. And if I have that in my schedule, I'm way more likely to do it. And those books change my whole outlook on life. So, any 18-year-olds that are listening to this, if you don't have like a daily reading routine, that is where success of any kind that I've had has come from.
And I also read a lot, and those listeners who are on my email list know, because every month I email out the books that I read, and I'm usually between about 3 to 7 books a month. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous way to learn from other people and achieve the things you want in life much faster. If people would like to find you, connect, learn more about the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So I'm a Facebook person. So Facebook is really the best way to connect with any of the services that I can provide to people. So, my counseling agency, if you're listening and you're in Iowa, we are doing telehealth therapy and telehealth behavioral health counseling for kids. So, and right now the major insurance companies are waiving, most of the insurance companies are waiving copays and are waiving like deductible patient responsibility parts. So, I can't guarantee that it is always going to be free for you, depending on your plan, but right now most of the insurance companies, it's free for you to do telehealth therapy or behavioral counseling for your kids. And that's not just in Iowa. I've seen that across different states. So check in your state, check with your insurance provider and ask them if they're offering that as a service and if you can do telehealth counseling. I've been doing telehealth counseling since March now. My counselor went to telehealth counseling and I meet with her twice a week now because it's free. Like I don't have to pay my copay right now. And so I put my headset on and I walk on the treadmill in the morning before my daughter wakes up and I talk to her on the phone on the treadmill. So telehealth is an option. So you can find us if you're on Facebook, you can go to www.facebook.com/Heart and Solutions. Or you can, and we post a lot of mental health information on their resources. And then, or you can go to our website at www.heartandsolutions.net and you can find us there as well. For the book, Breathing Through the Year, if you search Breathing Through the Year on YouTube, you'll be able to see videos of my daughter and I and her 4-year-old explanations of the breathing techniques, which I know I'm biased, but they're really, really cute. So hopefully you'll enjoy those. And then, hopefully kiddos can learn from those techniques from her as well. And then, so you can find us also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Heart and Stories. Heart and Stories. And we post the breathing videos there as well. So you'll get to see those. And then if you're interested in purchasing the book, it is available on Amazon for digital download. And then it's also available on my website at www.storiesfromtheheart.shop, storiesfromtheheart.shop. And it's available there as well. I also host a podcast called You Need a Counselor. My Vice President of Heart and Solutions, Krista Brown, and I host that podcast. So if you want to find us on Facebook, it's Facebook//You Need a Counselor podcast. And so you can find us on there as well, or you can search us on your podcast app, whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. And the premise of that podcast is that every single person can benefit from counseling. And we have people on there who talk about positive experiences they've had with counseling. We have people on that talk about negative experiences that they've had with counseling. And we help them process through those experiences so that they don't stop them from being able to experience the continued benefits of counseling. Also, if you're a person who thinks like, oh, counseling might be helpful to me or might be helpful to my child, but I don't know what it's like. There are all these resistances that we have to it because there is still stigma about mental health care in this country. But the podcast is really for you then, because we talk through all of the different benefits of counseling, but we also talk through really common resistances. So if you do have resistances to it, even though you think it's a good idea, you're not alone. But this podcast, we really explore a lot of those in detail. So the podcast is called You Need a Counselor.
And thank you for sharing that. And I will add them to the show notes. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Julie had a lot to overcome and a lot of mindsets that were created when she was a child. And they created those mindsets to benefit her. But the reality is they kind of held her back, and many people like her. And she had to overcome that. She also had to overcome herself to lose all that weight. And wow, in spite of this all, she's built wealth very quickly by taking steps forward and leaning into the fear. The cool thing is money does allow us the freedom to take chances. And Julie was able to do that, start her own business and create financial success. This week's action step was to put a time in the day to write down your dreams and work towards it. Those books that I mentioned in the intro, they can help you through this process. Check them out. If you're stuck, reach out. I know my clients have friction when they go through the book, and having me by their side ensures that they have success. It gives them accountability and it keeps them propelled moving forward. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a few friends. I would appreciate it. Have an abundant week.